Well, what if philosophy as we do it right now is actually not that important? And just think, maybe I was wrong about everything.
Philosophy has been left with all these unanswerable questions.
You'll know the extent to which you can reason your way to things. Okay. Alright. Episode 2. We should get like a shut
Yeah,
up,
we
like
should,
the movies, yeah. Alright.
Welcome everyone to Talk Radic. Thank you for joining. Raph and I, Ben, your host for Talk Radic. And thank you for joining us. Today we're going to have a little discussion. The central question that we'll be discussing is, why should we care about philosophy? What's the point of philosophy? Is in our modern world, does it still have relevance? And we'll be drawing from different points of view. We'll be raising points of view that, different sides of the question. Because, of course, Raph and I come from a perspective in which we appreciate philosophy. Mm-hmm. We'll just say that right now.
We'll make a whole podcast about it otherwise.
We appreciate it. We like thinking about these things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really not that simple. Like, why should you guys care about philosophy? Why should someone, even if they don't like philosophy, should they still care about it?
Yeah.
All these questions.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. Exciting.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, right, on a base level, I think philosophy is important. And I think it's important because it helps you think, right? Because you are a philosopher, whether you like it or not, because everyone has a philosophy. Everyone has these underlying preconditions or underlying preconceptions that they bring with them to any sort of discussion, any sort of decision, any sort of act that you decide to make in your life, right? And so whether or not you like it, a philosophy is impacting your life. So I think the reason why philosophy is important to think about is it helps you think about why you make certain decisions, right? People may ask you, why do you have such a position? Why do you do X, Y, and Z, right? And if you never bother to examine your own precondition, your own preconceptions, your own beliefs, right? You never bother to challenge those or think about them. I think you're kind of wondering a bit, right?
I like that.
Yeah.
That seems to, if you read Bertrand Russell, Problems of Philosophy, and the last chapter is kind of a summary of the value of philosophy, he calls it. And he says, the knowledge it aims at is the kind of knowledge which gives unity and system to the body of the sciences, and is the kind which results from a critical examination of the grounds of our convictions, prejudices, and beliefs. Yeah. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure, right? It's like, if you don't examine these prejudices and these things, you're kind of following them implicitly, but you don't get to choose what prejudices and beliefs you want to follow, right? Because everyone has prejudices, everyone has, preconceived notions of different things, right? If you don't think about things in any sort of philosophical sense, then you kind of just, you don't get to pick them. You don't have as much agency in your life to pick, how you want to live, by what code you want to live by, if you don't ever consider these things.
Yeah, and I think philosophy also has some kind of intrinsic value in that it deals with higher things than the simple physical. It deals with the non-physical. It deals with the questions also that you can't answer simply by doing a test or observing scientifically, It deals with these things that also ground science, they ground purpose. Like, he gives a couple examples, Russell. Has the universe any unity of plan or purpose? Or is it a fortuitous concourse of atoms?
Yeah.
Is consciousness a permanent part of the universe? These kind of things, like...
Yeah. And I think these questions, they might seem a bit, wishy-washy or non-important on the outside, right? You might be thinking, why do I care if I have a consciousness? How will that affect my life, right? But I really do think big questions help you answer the small questions,
For sure.
right? You know, people have a certain position on, let's say, the abortion issue, right? You're either pro life or you're pro choice. That's your position on that issue is very directly tied to your position on the inherent value of human life or the inherent value of bodily autonomy, right? And that's inherently tied to your set of your set of beliefs that you bring into that debate, right? And so if you never examine those
Yeah.
pre-beliefs that you hold, you you're making a decision that you didn't sign up to because you never thought about what the reasons why you hold those positions, right?
I will say though, we need to think about what the point of philosophy is, right?
Yeah,
Because Bertrand Russell, he raises a point here where is philosophy really about finding answers? Because he argues it's pretty much philosophy is the study of things that you'll never find definitive
yeah,
answers to.
yes,
So he argues the point is to contemplate these things,
yeah,
and to at least think about them.
yeah,
Accept that we will not know these
yes,
answers 100%, but at least you can think about them, and there's
yeah.
a value to that.
I think for sure there's a
Yeah.
value to that, but I think the end goal should be the pursuit of truth,
Answers? Yeah.
right? But on a practical level, yeah, maybe the pursuit of truth is not off. Sorry, there's some guy doing gardening outside, and it's very loud. If we don't edit this bit out, we apologize. Anyways, okay.
Just when it comes like
Where
this.
where was we?
Where was we?
Where was we? Oh gosh. Yeah, I think the end goal should be the pursuit of truth. But I think, well, obviously, on a practical level, there are questions, and most of the questions in philosophy are unanswerable, right? What is consciousness? What's the purpose of life? You can't get a definitive answer to that as clear cut as you can a definitive answer to scientific questions or
Yeah.
mathematical questions, right? But I think you should be aiming towards that.
Yeah, of course. I obviously you got to be aiming. You can't take a too relativist attitude. He says philosophy, though unable to tell us with certainty what is the true answer to the doubts which it raises,
Yeah.
is able to suggest many possibilities which enlarge our thoughts and free them from the tyranny of custom. And he calls it liberating doubt.
Yes, I like that, the tyranny of custom. I think that's the biggest thing for me for philosophy is if you are able to think about those big questions,
Yeah.
you get to free yourselves from preconceived notions. And I think
The
that's
enlightenment.
what
Yeah.
Kant talks about a lot. So in his essay,
What is
what is enlightenment, he talks about things called guardians that people use.
Yeah.
They basically he says you pay them to think for you, but I think we can take this in a less literal sense, not necessarily just I'm paying you monetarily to think for me, but
You subscribe. To
you
something.
subscribe to something to provide you answers that you don't want to think about. Now we do this whether we want to or not because it is impossible to think about everything, right?
To a
But
certain extent.
yeah, there is an extent to which you have to
100%.
put someone else's, you put your trust in someone else's
Yeah.
knowledge base. But I think we can, if you don't think at all philosophically, you don't think at all about bigger questions, you don't do any of it. You just offload all of the thinking to these guardians. You offload all of your thinking to other people, all right, and you just parrot what they say, and you parrot your own prejudices and your own ideas that you've never contested before, right? And so then you're kind of trapped, right? You can't think for yourself, essentially. I really think is the
And that's the whole point of philosophy, thinking for yourself.
yeah,
I think a big part of it as well is assuming there's more possible. If that doesn't really make sense. Russell kind of calls it like he compares the philosophical attitude to finding answers
yeah,
to the scientific. The scientific is you have a hypothesis
yeah,
and then you test things to prove your hypothesis.
yeah,
So the goal is to prove your hypothesis. So you're going in with preconceived expected answers,
Yeah,
or at least your predictions, right?
yeah.
But he states that the philosophical way of finding these answers
Yeah.
is to go in without any preconceived notions at all, and you're just open to be have that liberating doubt and
Yeah,
find answers.
yeah, I do think that so much of the value of philosophy comes with expanding your purview for what
Mm,
is possible, right? Expanding your purview and just think, maybe I was wrong about everything. You
mm,
know, maybe the way that I'm grounding how I know things, maybe the way I'm grounding my beliefs is all nonsense.
yeah.
And let me just ponder that. Let me think, can that be possible? If that's possible, how could it be possible?
Mm,
Right? And then by doing that, by examining your beliefs and saying, okay, what if I'm just wrong about everything? Right? And by doubting everything, then you can return back to your own beliefs and say, you know what? I do think I hold firm in my beliefs. Or, you know what? I think I want to change my beliefs. Because after examining it all, I realized, mm, I don't think I want to believe this thing anymore. Right? I think being able to
yeah.
cast doubt on your own ideas, right? Or being able to consider that, everything that you once believed was wrong, and having the ability to say, yeah, maybe I was wrong. Let me change that. Maybe let me
Yeah.
examine my own shortcomings, right? Because I think without that, that's how you get ideologues, right? When you don't actively practice, I'm gonna challenge my beliefs, or I'm gonna critically think about my own
Mm,
prejudice or whatever. That's how you get people who are like, ideologues. That's how you get
mm.
like Nazi Germany, where people were like, we will follow, Adolf Hitler to
Yeah,
the
and they're
end.
not open to hearing other points of view,
Exactly.
questioning these deep things. You know, Russell, he says that it's kind of like there's a tendency to think that these big things perform in accordance with man. So he says that there's a tendency which tells us that man is the measure of all things, that truth is man made, that space and time and the world of universals and properties of the mind, and that if there be anything not created by the mind, is knowable, unknowable, and of no account for us. So,
Yeah. Well, I think that is in of itself, that is the first um preconceived notion that we all have, is that like we believe that we're the center of all the answers, right?
exactly.
But even Russell even contests
Yeah,
that. He says, well, what if we're not?
exactly.
What
So
if we're not?
that's the enlightenment,
Yeah. You know,
and the philosophical, when you take that philosophical mindset.
yeah.
Um,
I think that's really
yeah.
cool.
Anyways,
But
well, okay,
but
here we
but
go.
I'm
Here
gonna
we go.
use my brain a bit
There we
and
go.
consider, well, what if philosophy as we do it right now is not that important? Let me put my money where my mouth is, and what if I try and contest my beliefs? My argument against the importance of philosophy, at least philosophy as we practice now or study now, is that right now we say that philosophy is to do with the immaterial, right? It's answering the big questions that are
Mm,
not materially based. But I do think there is a sense to which, if you intensely study something so immaterial, there is a level of diminishing returns at which it reduces the practical impact of it,
yeah.
right? If you don't ground that immaterial in the material, I think it is very difficult for you to get the fruits of studying the immaterial. So
Mm,
let me expand on that, because that sounds a bit weird, right? But let's say I'm big into studying philosophy. I read a lot about it. I study it a lot, and I do all the typical things. And I come to the conclusion that um, I think that consciousness, right? Just it is not a thing that exists. I think that we are just simply an amalgamation of matter. If I don't use that to engage in anything, outside of the. All right. So let's say I come to the conclusion that consciousness does not exist. If I take that and only take that back into the philosophical classroom or in the lecture hall or in the debate hall where there are no stakes. So if I take that and I just put it in the philosophical classroom and never use it, practically apply it anywhere, I think you're losing all the value that you got from thinking that up, right? Thinking up this idea or using that time. And I think a lot of the times people who love philosophy will do it for its own sake and will do it because it's fun and interesting to ponder, but then never use those ideas outside of their own study of
mm,
philosophy, right? And I think what that comes from is the separation between philosophy and the other disciplines, right? There's tons of intellectual disciplines, right? You got your philosophy, you got your maths, you got your arts, you got your
Mm.
histories, you got your social sciences, you got your science, like your real sciences. Those all used to be one thing.
Yep.
Those all used to be philosophy, right? And if you look at people like Aristotle, not only was he a philosopher who wrote about ethics and metaphysics, he was also like the first biologist. He also wrote about like
Yeah.
plants and animals, and he was wrong about most of science because yeah, he was a you know ancient Greek who didn't have the benefits of modern science, but he studied science. He was one of the first people to actually, in a systematic way, study science. Right? Plato, at the door of his academy, wrote something to the effect of, "If you don't like geometry, don't come in." I think in the origins of Western philosophy, at least, there was a strong link between you have to study
Mm.
the immaterial, but also study the material, and use and link those two together in order to be a better citizen or be a better person.
I would agree somewhat to that. But my feeling is that these things were simply called philosophy back
Yeah,
then, and then as answers became more obvious, or
yeah,
as we found scientific answers to these things,
yeah,
they no longer become philosophy. They
yeah,
they become something else, which is science. And so we can see that with psychology, for example.
yeah,
That was definitely a philosophy. It was all philosophy.
yeah,
And then when we studied the brain and we found scientific answers
yeah,
to
yeah,
it, then it became. So I feel like nowadays we have no choice but to really keep philosophy as the study of ideas which are not constrained, not kept in with observable,
yeah.
clear answers. So I'd say philosophy is different, but it's not less valuable because of that.
Yeah, I agree that like, as we've gotten better at doing science and as we've gotten better at, doing psychology, for example, right? We need to recategorize, right? We can't just all call it philosophy because people need to specialize.
Hmm.
No longer can you be the best premier at science and philosophy and psychology and the arts and music and everything because as a human race, we've simply gotten better at it over time, right? Because we iterate upon people,
Exactly.
right? So Aristotle, yes, he could be the best philosopher and the best scientist because he was the first scientist and the third philosopher ever, or whatever, right? I somewhat agree with that component. But what I will say is I think in terms of people studying philosophy as a discipline, I think there is a almost a dismissal of even attempting the other the other
Hmm.
disciplines
I see
to
that.
study that, right?
I do see
Like
that.
I think there's a weird divide in modern modern not even academia but just like modern discourse. It's like you're either arts, history, English smart, or you're math science smart.
It should be integrated.
I think we've lost
Yeah.
that integration, and because of that loss of integration, and because it's like, oh, you're either in one of those two camps, right?
Hmm.
And if you really like philosophy, you're probably into histories and the in Englishes and the literatures and all that,
Yeah.
right? And so if you just do that, then yeah, you can apply all these philosophical ideas in those areas, but then you miss out on like half of
Hmm.
the knowledge space, I think, and therefore at least half of the practical application of philosophy, right? I think that studying philosophy by itself is interesting. It's a very fun exercise for your brain. It can make you be able to think more for yourself.
Hmm.
But if you think talking about, okay, why is it important to my daily life? It's as important as you make it, right? So it's as important as you apply it, right? If you apply it in aspects of your life, right, then it will be very important. It will be very practical. But if you simply study philosophy for its own sake, you simply use it in, the philosophy lecture hall or in a philosophy debate, you don't take it outside of that, then it has pretty limited use.
Hmm.
If you know what I mean.
I'd say philosophy nowadays should be the foundation.
Yeah,
Teaches you how to think.
yeah,
It it gives you the questions. It helps you generate the questions,
Yeah.
and then you test those questions with the sciences, or at least they overflow into sciences and mathematics and all that.
Yeah, I think so because, I mean, we'll talk about philosophy as the immaterial, questions of the immaterial. Those immaterial things are the foundation,
Yeah,
right? That's the
exactly.
foundation of
Yes. Yeah.
all of our knowledge, foundation of all of our beliefs, how we act, what we do, why we do it, right? Those are the questions that philosophy asks and attempts to answer, we'll say. Uh, the degree to which it doesn't answer it is, pretty high, but it at least attempts to answer those questions. It's the foundation upon which we make our decisions. It's the foundation upon which we say that we know certain things. I think, but I think people might either only study the house, and some people only study the foundation. What I mean that by that analogy is some people only study, the practical application to their lives, right? So they might study science, or they might study finance, or whatever, right? They might only study the house and furniture, or whatever, but then they never bother to study the foundation, and that's not good, right?
Yeah.
Because then your house is built on nothing, and one small gust of wind, which is, why are you doing this, or what's the point of it all, or
Yeah.
existential dread. It can blow down the whole house and destroy everything. So you need some sort of philosophical foundation upon which you make your decisions and you live your life. But if you just do the philosophical foundation, I also think that's probably not good.
Yeah, and so I think all this leads to the idea that there needs to be unity,
Yes.
and you need to ground the sciences and other disciplines in those big philosophical
Yes.
questions.
You need to ground your practical everyday life in some sort of philosophical ground, like foundation.
Yeah.
But you also need to build upon a philosophical foundation with a practical life.
Yeah, so it goes both ways.
It goes both ways, right? Because you don't want to be like there's two extremes to this, right? You can be the guy who never critically thinks and just accepts everything, and he's basically like, you know, he's an ideologue. He just follows whatever everyone else is saying, never thinks for himself, and like, he can live life, he can make money, he can survive and eat food or whatever. But then he is almost trapped in his inability to make his own choice or think
Yeah.
for himself. And then there's the opposite end where you have this philosopher who all he does is sit in his in his armchair all day thinking and writing and never leaves the confines of his office. Never bothers using any of this philosophical, you know, bandwidth for anything else other than just to think. Right. And so this guy on the very practical end but no philosophical end, he might have the material needs for survival. He might contribute a lot to society,
Yeah.
right? But he is unable to think for himself. Almost has less free will because he can't. He just follows whatever. He doesn't
Exactly.
critically think at all.
And that's kind of what we read in
Yeah.
the Enlightenment. But one thing though, well, I feel like the main objection people would have, especially nowadays,
Yeah.
is that the fact of the matter is that philosophy nowadays, especially, because what used to be philosophy has become sciences, and now
Yeah.
philosophy has been left with all these unanswerable questions, and they likely will be unanswerable for many years, many millennia,
Yeah.
um, to put it out. But so then these people would have the objection, sort of like, is there any point in studying something which has no immediate outcomes? I guess.
Oh, I see what you mean. So like,
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
is
like,
there,
I
what's
think-
the point? What's the
well, I
value
think
in that?
because a lot of the questions that are left for philosophy to answer are just unanswerable.
Exactly. Because Russell, he says, the value of philosophy is, in fact, to be sought largely in its very uncertainty.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think
But how would you convince the modern person of that?
I've seen this argument a lot. It's like you've proved all the certainties. Like you can prove philosophy has proved the provables, But what about the questions that philosophers still answer all the time? What is the purpose of life? Why are we here? And it goes round and round in circles because no one can find a definitive answer because
Exactly.
there is no definitive answer that can be found here, right? It's impossible to answer really, to an extent. If you're talking about just the practical application of just doing this merry-go-round of trying to find the answers to what seems like the unanswerable, I think it comes down to what we said before. It's it's not just about getting to the point, it's also the journey of getting to that point, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like this. Um, People often ask, why do we learn all this stuff in English and maths? When am I ever going to use high level
Oh, yeah.
calculus in my day to day life? When am I ever going to need to learn about Shakespeare in my day to day life? When am I going to need to memorize? The point is not the calculus. The point is not the Shakespeare. The point is to teach you how to learn.
It opens your mind.
Right?
It really
It teaches
does.
you how to think. That's the point of subjects at school. Really, is to teach the maths at the school. Maths at school. Most of the high level maths that you might do at school is not to, it's not to make you use that in your, in your personal finances or something. It's so that you get the opportunity to use your brain, right? To really stress test your brain and make it work so that you're ready for the real world when you need to stress test your brain.
And you know what's possible as well.
Exactly.
You know these things, you can think about them.
Exactly. And I think it's the same for these philosophical questions. Sure, you will never actually get to the end, right? You will never be able to tell definitively this is the meaning of life, or I know definitively and I can prove with absolute certainty that there is a God, right? You can get
Yeah.
very, very close to these answers, but there'll always be some objection. There'll always be some sort of contestability because that's just the nature of things. It's immaterial. These answers are immaterial, and as are the questions. But the journey you take to get there, where in if you honestly and with conviction try to answer these questions, you will question your beliefs. You will stress test, your prejudices. You'll stress test your beliefs, and by the end of it, you'll have stress tested your ability to critically think. Right? You'll know the extent to which you can reason your way to things. You will know the extent to which you believe things. You will know the extent to which you can know things with certainty. These are all things that are very important, right? For your capacity to use your brain, to use your reason, to use your mind
Right.
in your life, I think. So yeah, there is a level to which it is uncertain, right? But I think you must embrace that uncertainty. Life is uncertain,
Yeah.
right?
I 100%.
That is my very long-winded answer.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing as well because reason is what separates humans from
Yeah.
the rest of
The rest of the
earth.
animals, right?
Yeah,
And I think if you never bother to interact with your reason, to use that reason, right, to really put it to the test,
think about the immaterial.
Yeah.
No other animal can do that.
if you never do that, what is the separator between you and a monkey or a chimpanzee, right? No, right, like really, like
Yeah,
if you never use your reason, right, then what's the point of you having it? You're just wasting it.
it's true.
And I think reason is like the greatest gift that humanity has. Whether if you believe that God gave it to you, or whether you believe it was a chance of evolution, right?
Yeah,
Reason, you should be using your reason, right? And if you use your reason, if you practice using your reason with philosophy, then you will be able to use that reason and that critical thinking in your more, quote unquote, practical side of your life. If that makes
Yeah.
sense. Right.
unless this is a quote. Unless we can so enlarge our interests so as to include the whole outer world, we remain like a garrison in a beleaguered fortress, knowing that the enemy prevents escape and that the ultimate surrender is inevitable. So it's like if you don't think about these things that are beyond the material, it's like you're confined to death.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're just waiting for death to come,
Yes.
and that doesn't just mean it's not just talking about the afterlife. Like that is an important philosophical
Yeah.
idea to contemplate, but thinking about these big things liberates you from the instantaneous, the material things,
Yeah.
the personal. You're looking out. It's opening your mind.
Yeah.
That's what I think is
like
so beautiful.
what you said about you're waiting for death, right? Because if you never think about the immaterial, why do you bother getting up in the morning, right?
Exactly,
If you never
yeah.
think about like why am I here? What's the purpose beyond, the material? If there is no purpose beyond the material, it's very hard, really. I think for me at least, it's very hard for me to think if there's nothing beyond the material, or I never think about the immaterial, or I just think about the material all the time, there's no end goal to it.
You're
Because
drifting. You're drifting.
yeah,
through
you're drifting through life and you end up dead anyways. Whether you care about the material or not, you end up dead, right? And I think there's a quote, Camus.
Yeah.
He said, "The purpose of life is the reason why you haven't committed suicide yet." Right?
Purpose of life.
Is the reason why you haven't committed suicide yet. Because if you have no purpose, if you have no purpose beyond, let's say your purpose, I want the accumulation of money, right? You might say, oh, that's a material purpose, but that's actually not true. If your purpose in life, you say, oh, my purpose is I want to accumulate as much money as possible, that's actually an immaterial, innate desire for you to have dominance over a superiority over everyone else because you want more money than them.
Yeah, there's something else there.
There's an immaterial, there's something behind the material want, right? There's something behind the material want of all the money, and that's your immaterial desire to own more than others, right? And so if you never consider this part, then you'll never understand this part. If you never consider the immaterial behind your material wants,
Your philosophy.
yeah,
Your
if
philosophy
you never consider
behind-
your philosophy, then
Exactly.
you'll be very confused,
Precisely.
right? You'll never know for sure. You'll never be able to diagnose why you do what you do. So yeah, I think that's a very long-winded, in-depth explanation of why is philosophy important, at least to us.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't even touched on the so many different branches of philosophy and specifics on why each branch is
Yeah.
important. But I mean, I think establishing that first bit, philosophy is the way you think, and if you never study how you think, then your thinking is gonna be all out of whack. I think that's for me the principal reason why it's important.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we should wrap it up now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening and
Thank you for listening.
joining us. And please, if you have any
Comments,
anything that
queries,
comments,
questions.
thoughts, we'd love to respond to them. We'd love to think about what you guys think.
If you guys disagree, please let us know. It's always good when someone disagrees with you.
It's a beautiful thing. That's what it's about. That's
Yeah.
what this whole thing's about.
All right.
So yeah, see you in the next one. And
Yeah. See ya. Episode 2 done.